Thanks for having me today. I'm not going to talk about data. We're not going to do anything digital, and I don't have a video. So if you want to be disappointed, just start off that way. I just wrote a book, and it's called Powerful. And I named it that because of a couple of things. And when I talk today, you're going to hear me talk a little smut about my own organization, about my own function, because I don't think that HR people do things as well as they could do. And I think that's partly because you as leaders don't expect very much from them. So one of the things that I hate most about HR speak and management speak is that it's not the language that the rest of the world uses. I mean, how come we have to have our own words, right? And one of my least favorite words is empowerment. You're empowered. Like what, we have a magic wand, we go around empowering people. You know why we have to empower people these days? Because we took it all away from them. There's all the rules and all the process and all the things that we do because we've always done them. We do things in management the way we've always done it, and then we call it best practices. Like, you know, when you guys say best practices, you actually measure it, right? So what I want to challenge us to do today is to think about the things that we do that we've always done because that's the way we've always done them. And all of you, the people that I heard this morning talking about transforming your organizations and your teams and leading into the future and being ready for those digital, global, quick-moving, fast, innovative organizations, we can't keep doing it the way we always did it because we're just going to end up with the same thing, right? Okay. I get to speak to groups like you a lot, and when I am on stage a lot, I am now paired with coaches, with professional sports coaches. And so one of the things that we did when I was at Netflix was we stopped using the word family, right? How many of you are in the same job that you had when you left high school or college? Wow, there's 2 people. Are you interns? The rest of us did not because we move on. And yet we obsess all the time with retention and keeping people and turnover, right? When the truth is that we all move on. And the truth is that when we join a company, we don't join a family. You're not going to lay off your brother-in-law because he borrows money and doesn't pay it back, right? That's a family. That's a different situation than when you're a team. And when you're a team, you can start thinking about things really differently. Here's one of the basic things that I did differently at Netflix that I invite you to do. What I decided I wanted to do that point at that company for me was to create the kind of company that would be a great place to be from. Imagine that. Imagine if that's the kind of teams that you build, teams that are great places to be from, right? So that whatever you give people, that's the skill, that's the information, that's the value that they bring to their next employer for the rest of their lives. Okay, so this is a picture of Montreal, Canada. I got invited to speak there in February. Anybody been to Montreal in February? Okay, well, I hadn't. I'm from California, right? So I tell my daughter I'm going to go speak in Montreal in February. She goes, Mom, go to Patagonia, get a puffy coat, get it now, right? One of the long ones. You basically want to wear a sleeping bag. So then I start looking at the weather in Canada, and I realize that it's 18 below zero. So I get a hotel so that I can go underground and I can go to the place where I'm going to speak. At the last minute, I'm going to speak with a guy named Scott Bowman. Anybody know who Scott Bowman is? He's a former National Hockey League coach, one of the winningest coaches in hockey history. I'm also speaking at the Bell Center in Montreal. Does anybody know what happens there? The Stanley Cup, right? So I'm down below in the green room. It's kind of like this one back here, but it's below the place where I'm going to talk. And I'm with Scott Bowman, and he's this lovely 70-year-old man, and we're talking about his kids and his grandkids and where he likes to play golf. And he looks at me and he goes, you know what, Patty? We're under the ice. And it occurs to me that we're in a hockey stadium. I've never spoken to a room bigger than this. And all of a sudden, I'm in a hockey stadium. So I walk up the back stairs, and I come out on stage like this, and there's a Jumbotron, and my face is on it. It's like, ah! It's really scary to see your face that big anywhere, right? So the crowd, which is thousands of people, they introduce me, and everybody politely claps, and I sit down in my little chair, and I've got my Botox face on. You know, the one where you're listening to, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, but you do it anyway. Scott Bowman comes up on stage, walks up onto the stage. The crowd goes ballistic, right? This is the winningest coach in hockey league history in the hockey stadium. Oh my God. I mean, people are like clapping like this. You know, if they had those foam fingers, they'd be foam fingering. They're taking selfies with him. So he comes up on stage, and he sits next to me, and the moderator says, Mr. Bowman, you've won so many games, so many tournaments. You've coached all the greats. What's your secret to success? And he said, well, we play an 80-game season, and every 10 games, I sit down with each of my players, and they do a self-evaluation. I do an evaluation. I look at all the stats. I look at all the teams that we're going to play for the next 10 games, how we're going to be a better team, how we're going to work together, what that person should do to improve, what we're going to do to improve as a team, who we're going to play against. And I do that with every member, every 10 games for the entire 80-game season. Moderator says to me, Patty McCord, it's said that you hate the annual performance review, and I do. I think it's an utter, complete waste of time. But he said, but I never heard you say what you would do differently. And I said what he said, right? So if you think about coaching your teams to higher performance, I recommend that one of the places that you look right away is to see what other great coaches are doing with their teams. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Austin, Texas, and the head of the coach for the San Antonio Spurs was on stage. And somebody said in the audience, this is a very sensitive audience, oh, you know, you must feel so terrible when you recruit all those incredible players, and at the end of the season, you have to let them go. Does that hurt? And he says, no, it's basketball, right? I mean, they sign up for it. They know they're not going to be dribbling in center court when they're 55 years old, right? So one of the things I want to invite you to do is to think about the teams that you are in charge of, the teams within your organization, and how you want to manage them to optimal performance, because it's my firm belief after 30 years of doing what I'm doing that when you go home from work and you tell your spouse or your pet, oh my God, it was a great day at work, comma, it's usually not, comma, the food was amazing. It was, we did it. And if you ask people about a time at work that was amazing, that they're proud of, if you think about it yourself, close your eyes and say, wow, I was really proud of accomplishing that. It's almost always hard. So here in Silicon Valley, here in the Bay Area, I consult with a lot of startups. I've seen swings and hammocks at the same place. Most of the places I go to have full bars. I know, and we wonder why people are still unhappy when we're doing so much work to make them happy. And I think what makes people happy is winning, and I think what makes people happy is doing amazing things with other people. But it's kind of about who's on the team, isn't it? So at Netflix one day, Reed said to the head of product and I, hey, guess who called me this morning? Who, Reed? Geez, we don't know, all the important people call you now. Well, Steve Jobs had called, and Steve Jobs had wanted Netflix to be on a new device that he was building, which we were to refer to as the transformational device. It was the iPad, of course, but we didn't know that. It didn't have a name. It was only the transformational device. And seriously, only 7 people from the company were allowed into the special area at Apple where the transformational device was held. Okay, so we launch it. It's a big success. It's amazing, you know, if you think about it. I think touch technology is probably one of the most transformative technologies that's come along in my lifetime. So I walk into the product meeting, and everybody's sitting around, a bunch of geeks like you guys, and I say, like I do, oh my God, it is transformational. Touch, it's like mammalian, it's primal, right? Last night I was at dinner, and a 2-year-old was streaming SpongeBob in his high chair next to me. He can't even read. I mean, isn't it? I can't wait until I walk into my media room and I swipe the wall and a movie starts playing. And the guys, they started like riffing like jazz musicians, you know, and one of them goes, oh man, we won't make you get up. You can still stay on the couch. And somebody else says, yeah, take out your phone. It's going to have a moodometer, and you put your thumb on it, and it'll say, oh, Patty, are you sad? And instantly, a romantic comedy starring all my favorite actors will start playing. And I thought, you know what? They're going to make that happen someday. I'm going to be in the room full of people that are going to be able to make that happen. And that's what you know, each of you know, is the secret to making amazing companies. It's having amazing teams. So I have a little methodology that I want to teach you about it, because I think it'll help you create the kind of teams that you want, that are teams that look a little bit different than everybody in the room. So if you think about what your team needs to accomplish in 6 months to a year, I want you to think about what you need to accomplish and what will be occurring differently than is occurring now. So give me all your numerals, you got all your metrics, there's gonna be, you know, we're gonna accomplish this, by this, it's gonna be faster, it's gonna be more complex, whatever it's gonna be. And then make a movie of it. Are people talking to each other more? Are there more meetings? Are there less meetings? Is there somebody who gets up and asks somebody else in marketing why they did that dumb thing, or are they just sitting around complaining about it, right? What's really occurring? Then you drop down and say, okay, in order for that stuff to happen, in order for that to occur in that time frame, 6 months to a year, what do people need to know how to do, right? Do you need people who are more curious? Do you need people who are more aggressive? Do you need people who have seen scale or complexity? Okay, now we know that. Then you drop down and say, what kind of skills and experience would it take for someone to know how to do that in order to accomplish that in that time frame? And then, and only then, who do you have? Because if you start with the team that you have, you can only do as much as that team can do. And if you start with the optimal team that you want, and you start with the problem that you're trying to solve, then you're going to go about hiring the people that can solve that problem and are passionate about it, not just other people who are just like you and just like the other people on the team. I just did a video the other day and I said, okay, here's the truth about how people really get promoted. You guys know this, right? You're in a room and someone says, you know, I need somebody really bright. I need him to be really smart, effective, intuitive, authoritative, someone just like me. Maybe me 10 years ago, because you don't want them to be too threatening, right? And that's what you hire. And that's how we end up with these homogeneous organizations where everybody's the same, because everybody assumes that all the smart people look like the smart person that started the team. So what I invite you to do rather than do that is start with the problem that you're trying to solve, work your way backwards, fill in those gaps and deltas. And oh, by the way, if it turns out in that analysis that there are people on the team that you wouldn't hire if they walked in the door to be on that team today, you can tell them. So the other part of what I want you to think about is that radical honesty, the ability to tell people the truth about what's going on with them, is efficient, it's effective, and it's kinder than keeping the truth from them. Here's another thought, another thing I hate. I hate performance improvement plans. I always say RIP the PIP. You know, remember the story I just told you about Scott Bowman? He actually was proposing a performance improvement plan. You know what a good tool that would be? Too bad we can't actually use it anymore, because it secretly means we're trying to get rid of you. So in my scenario where I'm working backwards and I realize, oh, wow, for what I have to do, I actually don't have the right team, right? It's not that these people aren't great. They're amazing. They're just the wrong people to do that job. So I'm going to put them on a performance improvement plan. Their issue's not performance. So think about things like that, right? Why do we do crazy stuff like that? It's so cruel. I'm going to prove to you in writing over a 3-month period that you're incompetent when we both know that's not true. I think you can have conversations with people that say, hey, by the way, here's what the team looks like. Here's what we need to accomplish. Here's the skills we need to have. Here's what people need to know how to do. And you don't do it, and you don't like it, and it's okay. So where else do we find so that you're able to make the contribution that you can make in the world and own your own career? So this is my algorithm for success, because I work with guys like you my whole life. And if I say words like algorithm, it helps. And as you all know, it's a mathematical sentence that's true, and this is my mathematical sentence about people. Is what you love to do that you're extraordinarily good at doing, something we need someone to be great at. So it's a very simple formula to look at the people on your team. If they're unhappy, then it's probably because you're having them do something either they're not great at or they don't love. It's honestly that simple. And when you try and squeeze those things together, it rarely works, because now the person's going to try and prove that you could really use that secret talent that they have that's undiscovered, that really, if you discovered it, you wouldn't care because you don't need to, right? So, and for yourself, make sure that you're doing the things you love to do that you're extraordinarily good at doing as leaders, because then people can see that magic happen, and they can see that that's where real power comes from, is people who are really capable at doing stuff that's really important and necessary. So, you know, when I coach women's groups or people earlier in their career, I tell them, this is a really important key thing to learn as you go out into the workforce every day. And recognize that, I was just talking to Bianca earlier about, sometimes I say, you know those employee engagement surveys, you guys do those? Who does employment engagement surveys? I tell women especially, like, so when your company talks about engagement, nobody put a ring on it. And when you go interview with somebody else, you're not cheating on your husband. You're actually trying to find out what you're worth. And I recommend that people do that all the time. And if you're in a very large organization, which many of you are, like, here's another thing that's weird. How come when somebody from your department gets called by somebody from another department to interview for their department, that's poaching? But when we go get great people from other companies to work for us, that's staffing? And strangers can call our employees and recruit them, and that's okay, but we can't call each other and recruit each other? So the other thing is, these incredible, amazing future leaders of your companies are already in your companies. And it's perfectly reasonable to be thinking about recruiting as something that you do inside as well as you do it outside. Because those of you who've been around as leaders for a long time, you know who rises to the top, the people that get stuff done, right? You see it. You can see it because you float over it. So when you float over it, be sure that you look for every kind of face when you're looking for somebody to be successful. Because transformation, how we move our organizations into the world of the future, is not about understanding and recognizing that millennials are different than us. Okay, you were a millennial, I was a millennial. It's called being in your 20s. What do you want in your 20s? Everything. When do you want it? Now. Right? Okay, so my son just turned 30. I said, so what do I call you? A third-millennial now? Right? Well, he just got a different job and he got engaged, and I bet you I'll get a grandkid pretty soon. And guess what he won't be? A millennial anymore. Guess what he won't be? 20 and single anymore. So if you think about the people in our organizations as people at different parts of their career rather than stereotyping them, let's think about millennials and maturity, right? I know a lot of very mature 20-somethings. I know a lot of really immature 40-year-olds. Am I right? Okay, so when we start pairing the people with the future and the abilities in different perspectives with those of us who have been around a while and have some wisdom, and we can put those two things together in a way that we're learning from each other, then we're transforming our organizations into organizations that can move quicker, that can think faster, and that can leverage each other's knowledge. And that's what I think is the real transformation, not understanding that millennials use their cell phones all the time, because so do we, right? The other part about transformation that's really important for you guys to do is to understand that people can't be what they can't see. And the most important thing you can do with your organization to change your culture is to look at you and your team and make sure that you and your team are walking the talk every single day. Because my experience with engineers in particular, and I love you guys, the world is good or bad, black or white, right or wrong, 0 or 1. Am I right? And everything in between is bullshit. And anytime you say something and you do something different, then the cynical conspiracy theorist rises up. And so don't give them a reason to do that. Be who you want to be. Tell your truth. Think about everything that you do in your organization that you could be doing differently. Think about every management process and procedure and treat it like a product, okay? So back to the Scotty Bowman story. Let's say we believed that giving people feedback was important for their performance. Kind of everybody agrees with that. So let's say we want to put together a system so that we can give people feedback to improve their performance. If that was the product you were building, would you build the annual performance review? I mean, giving people feedback once a year is not going to improve their performance. And then people say, oh, well, giving feedback's really hard. They always mean, here's an interesting thing about feedback in this culture around the world these days. It means feedback equals constructive criticism, which means telling people something hard that they don't want to hear in a way that doesn't seem mean. Right? If you really, those of us who have pets and children, you know which kind of feedback works. What you just did, that's great, do that again. And when you give people that feedback, they do it that afternoon. Instead, we do that was a bad thing, you did that bad thing again. When you do that bad thing again, feel bad. And we do, but it's really ineffective, right? So think about every single thing that you're doing as a management practice in your company and ask yourself two things. Why? And if I started over again, is this what I would do? And more importantly, here's a crazy, crazy, crazy innovative idea. Oh my God, this is incredible. Stop doing stuff that doesn't matter. You want free time to innovate? You want some space in your organization to do things differently? You want speed? Then make sure that the things that are in front of the people that work for you aren't getting in their way. Right? Do you really need to ask permission from somebody in finance to spend over $10,000 or whatever your limit is? Because your engineers know that 10,050 is more than 10,000, trust me. Right? So every time that you integrate and you cross-functionally collaborate and you put people in teams that can understand each other's perspectives, particularly those of you in security, you've got to be able to speak each other's language and talk to each other, because that's how we transform companies into teams that move faster. So to innovate, sometimes it means stop. And when you start with something old that you've always done, and imagine that if you started from scratch, how you might do it differently. Do you guys want to talk? Do you have any questions? Do you want to talk about things that are in your organization that we could fix, or what's standing between you and real transformation? No, I've stunned you. You know, I learned all this stuff at Netflix because we reinvented our business more than once. And the story of Netflix is a story of incredible success and forward-moving innovation. But the truth is, it wasn't always that way, and we had lots and lots of obstacles. How many of you used the DVD by mail service? Some of you in the US? Yeah, remember when we started that, Blockbuster was 150 times bigger than we were, right? And those of you that use the streaming service all around the world, when we launched the streaming service on the laptop, right, which was the only way that we could do it, we never imagined that you'd be able to take content and watch it in 5 different countries in 5 different days, because all the content was purchased by each region, right? So the global company that Netflix is these days, the global self-producing content company, bears no resemblance to the company I started that was putting DVD in the mail. And that's because we paid tons of attention to articulating where we were going, what the time frame was, and we wrote down how we wanted to behave with each other as we did it. So culture is something that's always evolving. You can't keep it. Culture can't be transformed by one person demanding that it be so. Culture's behaviors, its rituals, it's the stories you tell, it's what you reward, it's what you punish. It's the things that people see each other doing. It's not what you say you're going to do. So that real transformation can only come from you and from the people on your teams. Talk to me, someone. Or I'll have to start singing and dancing. I'll have to start ranting about equal pay. I can do that.
So if I don't ask a question, you'll sing and dance?
I might do it anyway. Ask me a question.
Right, when you talk about a lot of the things you're talking about, it makes sense with teams that are winning, teams that are in good situations, teams with good trajectories. Can you share a couple of tips, hints, tricks of how organizations that are going through turmoil, organizations that are in turnaround mode, organizations where the people on the team feel like they're on the 0-12 team just trying to get a little bit of win, like how you manage in those situations where a lot of these concepts, which I subscribe to, it doesn't seem like they fit on day one, and how you ultimately get a team to, to the point where you can put some of these more innovative things in place.
Yeah, well, you've got to be really clear about where they're going or where they're not. And in the situation you're describing to me, are these the right people going forward, or are they just stuck? Because if you have a team of people that really is the wrong team to do what you need to do, then set them free, right? Set them free so they can find great work somewhere else. But are you just talking about something that's tedious and hard?
No, I'm talking about a good team that's just been put into a bad situation. Yeah,
well, then I think it very much is about vision and outcome. I had a great guy that I learned a ton from, and I can't use the slang word that I usually use, but he's my unmesser-upper. I had to explain to my CFO one time, we were sitting in an engineering meeting, and the engineers were talking about hairballs in the code. And he said, Patty, they said hairball. Like, what does that mean? I said, oh, that's a technical term. And he goes, for what? I'm like, oh, when the technology just gets so convoluted and nobody remembers who started it, and there's nothing left to do but either untangle it or cough it up, which is how I learned about culture too, by the way, hairball and culture. But that's a situation that you just have to untangle the hairball, right? You have to take it and stretch it out. And the other thing I think about teams that are in situations like that, make sure that you celebrate every win, even if it's small. Right? Those are the hard, pushing the rock uphill things are tough to do, but we sometimes don't reward people until the rock is all the way up the hill instead of resting, giving people some encouragement and then moving it forward. Those are tough situations. Yeah.
Maybe you don't need the mic.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you describe leadership in the context of all of what the truths you provided to us?
The question is, how do I describe leadership in the truths? It's when leaders stand up and say the hard things. It's when leaders teach people how to lead. So here's an example. I always say, you know, when you confront an employee, so first of all, hire really smart people, give them really wonderful things to do and expect a lot from them. That's the three of them. And on expectations, you know, if you expect excellence, you'll be surprised what you get even from mediocre people. If you expect mediocrity, that's all you'll ever get. But when someone says, or you hear that noise in the organization, you know, management doesn't know what they're doing. They made a bad decision. Or you stand up and you're going to admit that you made a bad decision. There's two things you need to do when the person says management doesn't know what they're doing. One, if you were in management, what would you do? Two, more importantly, second question, if you were in management, what information would you need to have to make a great decision? So the more you can model that questioning that we do as executives, that we seem at every single level, what would you do? What information would you need to have? We can teach people how to think critically. And so we've reversed it now, and we call it empowerment, right? We're going to empower you to think critically. Well, you have to have context, you have to have information, you have to have guidance about making decisions. So I think when I see leadership, it's when leadership stands up and says, hey, by the way, that direction that we were going, I was wrong, right? Here's the information I had when I made that decision at the time. Here's the information that I have now. That's really important, and that sets the context for you to be able to make good decisions. So pushing context down allows more people to stand up and take leadership positions. They need to know why. You know, I always say, like when I'm talking to you and I think, this guy does not have a clue. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. If I assume that you're a smart person, like me, then I'm going to have to close my eyes and count to 10 and say, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. You simply don't know, right? So I now need to give you better information, better context for you to make decisions, and so that we can have a conversation about the problem we're trying to solve. The other thing I think that's really important is to behave and talk about what we're doing on behalf of the customer. So sometimes we take that management means being really kind to people and taking an interest in them personally, but management means really telling everybody who you work for, and that person that you work for doesn't usually live in the company. So the more we can pay attention to our customers and our clients and our constituents, then we're more able to serve each other as members of the team, right? So we don't have to make each other happy, we just have to make that person happy that doesn't work here anymore. Some ideas? Yeah.
So Patty, thank you for sharing some of your insights. Very, very, I think, different perspective. You put a lot of focus on the culture and the culture fit. I'd like to get your thoughts. When you're hiring somebody from outside, is the culture fit is important or the culture augmentation is important?
I think it's important that you think about what you're talking about when you say culture. So I'm very anthropological about it, right? I think it's the way you operate. It's more like your operating style and principles and fundamentals than it is about the way you act. So like when I talk to young companies, they think culture fit means I want to have a beer with them, right? And there's plenty of people that I want to have a beer with that I do not want to work with. And there's plenty of people that I work with that I wouldn't necessarily want to have a beer with, but I love being shoulder to shoulder with them. So if you think about, again, the focus on the problem that you're trying to solve rather than the person, then you're going to be more open to lots of different ways to go about that, to think about that. So it's not, you know, and the other thing is, culture is not this big overarching global thing. The way you operate fundamentally as people is, like, if you say that you want to be honest and truthful, right? You want to have people with integrity who operate independently and truthfully, but the truth is no one ever actually does, and some people have all the information and other people don't. Then people see right through that, right? So culture's about what you do, So that's what you have to think about. So for example, when I would interview people for Fit at Netflix, we were very, 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 very deliverable driven, right? We really wanted people who we believed would accomplish what they needed to accomplish on time with quality to meet the customer's needs. And if they didn't and they weren't able to, they'd raise their hands and say they couldn't. Right? And so one of the big culture fit misses for us often was people who were in large organizations where people did a lot of presentations and didn't actually accomplish anything. So we were very hands-on. So that's an example of a culture fit thing that's not in the esoteric honesty and integrity, right? It's about really being able to deliver stuff on time. You know, I got asked a lot when Google just had its big brouhaha about the James Dannemore, the guy that wrote the treatise inside of Google. And people asked me, you know, would you have fired him? And I'm like, of course. But hopefully I wouldn't have hired him in the first place. And you know that guy was arrogant in the interview. I mean, you know, don't hire people who have attitude, and you probably won't have people who have attitude in your company. Pay attention to that stuff. Right? I never said I told you so, and I also never said no. I would interview somebody, at the end I would say, hey, did he tell you about his current boss? Yeah, that guy was such a jerk. Did he tell you about the last boss? He was even worse. I can't believe the bad luck this guy's had. Like, yeah, how far back did you go? Because I went to high school. Do you know he was smarter than his high school principal? Do you know that he's been smarter than every CEO he's ever worked for? Do you know he's smarter than pretty much everybody on the planet? And he's a miserable, unhappy guy. And my mama would say, misery loves company. So guess what's going to happen to your happy team? Oh, I can handle him, I can handle him. Sure you can, right? But everybody else is going to be miserable. But you telling me I can't hire this guy? Like, no, it's not my team. The job of management is to build great teams. It's really that. Great teams that do amazing work, that serve the customer on time with quality, and that's it. And so that's where, you know, when you have that team that has to struggle, your job is to make sure that anything that gets in their way, that those distractions come apart, because that just come away from them, because that just makes them crazy and slows it down. Right? Let's talk about a couple of things since I have my bully pulpit here. Let's fix pay inequality. You guys spend a lot of money. You write a lot of checks. I'm not talking big data here in the cloud. You know, get the average salaries of every male and female person by job title in your organization. If there's a discrepancy, fix it. Go a long, long way. And don't do things that HR is going to police you to do better. I was just in an HR convention thing, and I said to them, I'm like, look, it's not our job to punish people for sexual harassment after it happens. It's our job to make sure this doesn't happen in our organizations, and it's your job too. And these transformations, these global transformations, are really important for us. We need all the capable, you know this. We need every capable, creative, talented, technical worker that we can find. So make sure that everybody who has that capability is being paid the same amount of attention to, so that you guys have the workforce that you need for the future. Because it really matters. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Great. I'm Neil Gomes. I'm from Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health System. What I'd really be interested in is, you know, as a digital company, Netflix, that created a digital platform that we all enjoy. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Jefferson, so this is a natural question for me. How did you use digital platforms at Netflix in the HR space? You know, we have challenges in almost every other space. In most industries, HR is seen as a blocker many times for doing innovative kinds of things. They want to standardize, let's say, you know, job descriptions, or they want to standardize competencies, and they try to push you into a box that maybe you don't fit into, you know. And you know, but with digital platforms, with machine learning, AI, the kinds of things that sold Netflix as a business and made it valuable to consumers, how do you take that and then apply it to a field like HR?
Well, I never did any of those things. I never did, I never preached sameness. I never tried to put people in the box. I think in our engineering team for almost 15 years, I had one job title, software engineer, and the salary range was like 70K to 700, right? Because it mattered what you did and what your skills were and what your market value was. I think there's a ton of space for innovation with digital platforms in HR. But I don't think any of it's around the stuff that we traditionally do. Just making something automated or putting it online. You know, like I talk to HR people who get just like all excited because they put their form online. And you know, it's like really seriously, I can buy a car with my cell phone, but I can't get permission to spend money. You know, I'll give you an example, like all the approvals, all the stuff that we do for approval processes, almost everything, you know, so we've also done these big pendulum swings, right? HR used to be an administrative function, and the truth is we can automate virtually all of the administrative functions. So that's a really good, useful help of getting stuff done in our companies that humans don't need to do anymore. And so HR people didn't like doing that stuff either, by the way. Then we swung to HR is the department that keeps you from getting sued by your employees. Watch out for those evil employees because they might sue you. So, you know, sometime I want you guys to walk yourselves through what it would actually take to sue a company. You know why people sue companies? Because they're pissed. That's why they sue. And they have to stay mad for a really long time. So if you wanted to really sue a company in America in particular, I think from like filing a complaint with the EEOC to being in a courtroom is on average 6 years. You can stay mad for a long time. So the truth is protecting ourselves from the 2% of people who are going to do that evil thing. I mean, you guys know this, you're security folks, right? So you want to make sure that you get to the whatever the problem is and eliminate the problem rather than close down the whole system because there might be a problem sometimes. So that's the way we've swung the pendulum in HR, and silly. So, you know, I think there's lots of ways to do feedback digitally. I think that the way we work remotely is super helpful. I think I have every face-to-face digital communication platform known to humankind on my laptop. You know, people are like, hey, can we do a video interview? I'm like, are we Zooming? Are we Skyping? Which platform are we using now? So I think all of that stuff is super helpful. But I don't think automating a process that we don't even need is very helpful. So there's this Laszlo Bock, who is the head of HR at Google. He has an HR analytics team. He's not there anymore, but when he was there, he spent 5 years at Google analyzing every single promotion, every single highly rated manager, every single attribute that made great management at Google for 5 years. He went through all the performance reviews, he went through all the referrals, incredible analytics. What he came up with is astounding. Great managers communicate clearly and often. You know, have goals and objectives that are hard but can be met. They praise people when they get. I know it's amazing how he came up with that. But he couldn't say those things to engineers at Google without data. So I think it's about. I think the best thing that you can do with your HR teams is tell them how to productize what they do. Tell them how to be evaluative. Ask them, why do we do this? And if it's because somebody might sue you, then you can ask, or it's against the law, you can say, can I see the statute? Laws are written so that you can read them. And it's usually not against the law, it's usually that somebody might sue. So then you can say, when's the last time somebody got sued for that and what were the damages? Right, so we can push back on each other because we do with products. Why can't we do it with how we run people, right? How we manage people. So it's just teasing it out, teaching people how to run it like a product. Thank you for having me here. It's been really wonderful. And I want you to go out and throw something away. Promise? Okay, thank you.